Google said on Tuesday that it had blocked mobile apps connected to Russian news outlets RT and Sputnik from its Play Store. It comes after the company confirmed that it had removed Russian state-funded publishers, including RT, from its news-related features, including the Google News search tool. The European Union also banned RT and Sputnik with immediate effect for systematic disinformation over Russia's invasion of Ukraine on Wednesday. The sanction means EU operators will be prohibited from broadcasting, facilitating or otherwise contributing to the dissemination of any RT and Sputnik content. Apple also said Tuesday that RT News and Sputnik News were no longer available for download from its App Store outside Russia. RT Deputy Editor-in-Chief Anna Belkina said in a statement on Tuesday, quote, "This collective establishment seems to be terrified of the mere presence of any outside voice for the fear of losing their historically captive audience if that audience encounters a different perspective." Sputnik did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Google already had restricted news companies funded by the Russian government from advertising tools and some features on YouTube.
Japan's big firms may be starting to join the corporate exodus from Russia. Honda said Wednesday that it had suspended exports to the country. The car maker said that was due to difficulty shipping vehicles and making payments amid sanctions. Now its Japanese rivals may follow suit. The Nikkei newspaper says Mazda also plans to suspend shipments. Nissan said it was monitoring the situation in Russia very closely, and Mitsubishi said it could suspend production and sale of cars there. That leaves the focus on the world's biggest automaker, Toyota. It says business in Russia is continuing as normal, though there had been some disruption to shipments. Japanese firms have been very muted in their response to the crisis in Ukraine compared to US and European rivals. Ford and other global automakers had already said they planned to suspend operations. Pressure on the Japanese firms is only likely to mount.
I'm inclined to propose and support a 25 basis point rate hike.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell told lawmakers he would back a 25 basis point rate hike in March, and is prepared to go even higher if inflation doesn't subside in the U.S. as fast as expected.
Those of us on the committee have an expectation that inflation will peak and begin to come down this year. And to the extent inflation comes in higher or is more persistently high than that, then we would be prepared to move more aggressively by raising the federal funds rate by more than 25 basis points at a meeting or meetings.
In his testimony before a House panel Wednesday, Powell reiterated the core Fed narrative that high inflation, which is running at about 3 times the central bank's 2% target, and an extremely tight labor market warrant higher interest rates. But Powell admitted that the central bank's plan has been complicated by the outbreak of war in Ukraine, raising a host of new risks, from even higher inflation to slower growth and the possibility of stress in financial markets should the conflict broaden or conditions deteriorate.
The ultimate economic effects of the war and all of the sanctions and events yet to come are just very highly uncertain, and we need to understand that.
The Fed slashed rates in 2020 to blunt the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. But there is now broad agreement that the current level of borrowing costs is out of step with an economy that has rebounded faster than expected from the crisis. The Fed chair told lawmakers that the coronavirus pandemic's impact on the economy finally appeared to be easing, and that hiring remains strong and inflation remains a chief risk.
Sudan is once again lurching towards an economic collapse following a coup in October, with exports plummeting more than 85% in January, according to central bank data. Cut off from billions in foreign assistance, the military-led government is raising prices for everything from cooking gas to healthcare. Last month, in a move that was subsequently suspended, the cost of admission to healthcare facilities went from 250 Sudanese pounds, or around half a US dollar, to 4,200 overnight. That's according to Dr. Ali Shakir, head of one of the country's largest public hospitals.
We were surprised that they were asking us for money that we need from citizens' pockets, whom we know for sure have nothing.
وكده يعني نحن العيان بيجينا بنشيل منه
The patient cannot even afford 250 Sudanese pounds, which is about 50 cents, for the patient's file fee, based on the old prices. We waived this for them. It was raised to £4,200. Patients say they cannot afford this.
250 جنيه اترفعت ل 4200 جنيه. كويس العيان بيجيك بيقول لك يا اخي انا ما عندي.
Sudan's ruling council said in a statement that prices would be reviewed and that the government did not consider healthcare a revenue earner. But the country faces a precarious economic picture. Inflation has eased slightly, but remains at one of the highest rates worldwide, at 260% in January. Sudan's long-running economic crisis, a legacy of decades of war, isolation and sanctions, had shown signs of abating before the coup. But now the population faces renewed violence and rising levels of hunger. Following the devaluation of Sudan's currency a year ago, the exchange rate had stabilised at about £450 to the dollar. But in recent weeks, the black market has resurfaced and the pound was changing hands at $530 against the dollar on Wednesday, compared with an official rate of $443.50.
Wall Street ended sharply higher on Wednesday after Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell signaled the central bank would likely not raise interest rates as high as some investors had feared. In testimony to the House Financial Services Committee, Powell said he is inclined to support a 25 basis point rate hike in March, quelling some concerns about the potential for a more aggressive hike. James Bruderman is vice chairman of 1879 Advisors.
With Powell's testimony today, what the markets are taking away is that Powell's got his pulse on where we are both in the economy and on the geopolitical front, that he's supporting a 1/4 basis point increase and not a 1/2 basis point like a lot of hawks were calling for, suggests that he's going to be nimble in his approach to sopping up the outstanding liquidity in the markets.
The Dow rose 1.8%, the S&P 500 gained 1.9%, while the Nasdaq climbed 1.6%. Powell's comments helped calm investors after Russia's invasion of Ukraine sent markets into a tailspin. Energy shares resumed their march higher, with the S&P 500 Energy Index rallying 2.2% as Brent crude jumped to near 8-year highs. In individual movers, Apple ended 2% higher after announcing a product launch for March 8th, when it's expected to promote a low-cost version of its popular iPhone with 5G. And Nordstrom surged 38% after the department store chain forecast upbeat full-year revenue and profit.